And now, moving along into a quick Google Meet call, we will be having, joining me online, Prof Niaz Asadullah, School of Business, Monash University Malaysia, and Southeast Asia lead of the Global Labour Organization. Thanks for joining us on Niaga Spotlight, Prof Niaz. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, Prof, moving along quickly, the urban-rural divide in Malaysia's household income classification is also stark. For example, M40 salary in urban qualifies as T20 in rural. Many M40s in urban areas now classify as B40 due to rising inflation. What more with subsidies potentially being cut? Can income classification, according to household income, address this issue?
That's a great question, and you're right to worry about the relevance of the broad three-way income classification. For years, such classification helped the government to focus on the needs of most deprived section of the society. Take, for instance, EKASI database that was used to identify the majority of low-income Malaysians living on less than 5,000 ringgit a month. They were being identified as B40, but this income threshold has now become questionable, particularly after the pandemic, where 20% of Malaysian households from M40 group have been pushed into B40 income category. And this has created a lot of social anxiety among our so-called middle class. And add to this the growing inflationary pressure in Malaysian cities. And they have combined to create new forms of social exclusion and economic vulnerability, and the pressure on the government has grown. And this is why our economy minister, YB Rafizi, is considering a new approach next year, focusing instead on household-led income, disposable income, reclassifying the current three-way approach that we have to target who should receive government support to make sure that no one is left behind in such difficult times.
Thanks for that, Prof Niaz. Now, moving in a little bit deeper, overall inflation is currently at 3.4%. In fact, of course, Malaysia's consumer price index, the CPI for food and non-alcoholic beverages, was just recently reported at 6.850 as of March 2023, outpacing all other categories, while wages, of course, remain stagnant. In your opinion, what public policy strategies can help Malaysian households cope more broadly?
Let me first clarify one thing.
Sure.
The mismatch between income and prices is a much bigger concern for the poor. Their consumption basket is dominated by food items. They have less savings to cope with sharp increases in cost of living. And for these reasons, low-income families face significantly higher effective inflation rate compared to high-income households. My own research on low-income families in Klang Valley shows that many are taking up multiple jobs to cope with rising prices, leaving them frustrated and unhappy. This is not acceptable. In terms of public policy strategies, therefore, the government needs to ensure better income support for the poor, while at the same time moving away from price subsidies, fuel subsidies, which are regressive in nature. This is a fiscally smarter way of redistributing market income through effective transfers for those who deserve it most.
Thanks for that, Prof. And of course, speaking of more fiscally feasible solutions and avenues, now cash aid programs for B40, for example, are the go-to silver bullet for government assistance, have been historically so, but don't cover, for example, M40 households with home and car loan installments to pay off, which have also climbed higher due to increases in, of course, the recent Bank Negara Malaysia's OPR rates. In your opinion, how can properly targeted subsidies then assist with improving the welfare of impacted household? We're talking about an overall as well as, in particular, transfers to households. Prof Niaz?
Yes, we need to move away from blanket subsidies and use tax revenue to increase overall social spending. But at the same time, our social assistance schemes are not well targeted, often wrongly leaving out deserving families. This is why some experts are calling for a multidimensional needs assessment framework, looking beyond a certain household income threshold, using a variety of income and non-income indicators. Others are even calling for something a bit radical, such as monthly universal basic income. The good news is that our new government is listening. They're reviewing some of these proposals, including the need to revise income classification, as well as using an integrated socioeconomic database to make sure that the distribution of targeted subsidies are more focused and balanced.
In particular, I'd like to just touch upon that integrated socioeconomic database. How important is that going to be, Prof Niaz, in particular to figure out perhaps a more transparent way for UBI?
Absolutely. I mean, well, we have to realize that, as Malaysia is, growing in terms of its per capita income, aspiration of citizens are also changing. There is now concerns about relative needs, not just absolute deprivation, and also many are aiming high, and this means that their consumption pattern is also changing, and this calls for a greater focus on non-income aspect of deprivation. And I think it is in this context that the socioeconomic database is important, but also let's not ignore the fact that there is enormous demographic differences across households. Single mothers with several babies is not the same as an intact family, intact marriage with 2 children. This is where, again, the socioeconomic database is important, because then we are going to compare apple with apple instead of apple with orange.
Indeed, absolutely. One size never actually fits all. One last area that I'd like to discuss, Prof Niaz. Now, Malaysia's blanket minimum wage rate, though revised to 1,500 ringgit, in fact, exactly a year ago, still fails to reflect living wages, especially in urban centres. What should the broader economic focus be moving forward to ensure higher salaries and, of course, stronger purchasing power, in particular for the B40 households?
The broader policy focus should be economic empowerment of the B40 community. We need to invest early in the human capital of youths from B40 families, making sure that they're ready for the labor market with the right skills and quality education. Currently, we are turning out too many graduates with empty diplomas. We can't expect employers to respond with higher salaries if demand is not matched by a supply of productive workforce. But, beyond minimum wage, we must also not forget B40 individuals who don't rely on salary jobs. Many are self-employed, running small-scale businesses or involved in low productivity agriculture. For them, the government needs to innovate targeted interventions for improved access to technology, finance, and even skills-related training.
Fantastic. I think that puts it in a very nice nutshell. Thanks again for your time, Prof Niaz. Super insightful, and for joining us once again on Niaga Spotlight. Now, of course, changing the ceiling for household income classification and more equitable distribution of government assistance looks key to stabilizing living standards while wages continue to remain stagnant. It's time, though, now for a quick break. Stay with us, and we'll be right back with Niaga Spotlight.